silence. That's where it all begins. Not with a loud scandal, not with a dramatic fight, but with something far more terrifying. Calm. When the person you share your life with suddenly becomes a mirror, emotionless, without blame, just reflection. She thought she was stepping toward freedom. He, meanwhile, was stepping back, into the shadows. While she chased the thrill, he was watching. Not with jealousy, but with calculation. Not with anger, but with cold precision. And at the very moment she believed she held control in her hands, her life was already resting in someone else's. Greetings, my dear friend. I am very happy that you are watching my video, and I will be even happier if you subscribe to my channel. This will make me even happier. Let's get started. Diana sat across from Talia in their familiar corner of the cafe, idly stirring her coffee, the spoon clinking gently against the ceramic. A faint smile lingered on her lips, left over from a shared laugh, but her focus had drifted elsewhere. Talia noticed the shift and tilted her head with quiet curiosity. "So," she ventured, narrowing her eyes ever so slightly, "what's going on with you and Colin?" Diana let out a small breath and set the spoon beside her cup. "Things are okay. Colin's a good guy, dependable, steady. We've been together almost 7 years, she went on, her fingertip tracing lazy circles along the rim of her mug. But lately, I keep wondering if this is all there is. If maybe I'm meant to feel something more." A spark of intrigue lit Talia's expression. "More?" she echoed. Diana gave a slow nod. "Yeah, more than the daily routine, more than the quiet, predictable life. Colin thinks everything is perfect, but I've been feeling like something's missing, like I've gone a little numb." Talia leaned in slightly, her voice dropping in volume and rising in intimacy. "Funny you should say that," she said, a conspiratorial smile touching her lips. "I've actually been experimenting with something new myself." She paused for effect, then added, just above a whisper, "Have you ever thought about opening things up a little? Just seeing what else might be out there?" Diana's eyes widened, her brows lifting in surprise. "You're serious?" "As a heart attack," Talia replied with a light laugh. "My husband and I had a long talk about it. It wasn't easy, but honestly, it's been incredible. Giving each other a bit of breathing room, some space to explore. It's changed everything." Her voice grew more sincere. "It's not about replacing anyone or tearing anything down, it's about feeling awake again. And weirdly enough, it's brought us closer." Diana sat back, taking in the idea with quiet hesitation. "How would I even bring that up?" she murmured. "Colin would never see it coming. He'd probably think I'd lost my mind." "Start with honesty," Talia said gently. "You're not blaming him, you're just opening a door. You might be surprised by his response. Sometimes marriages need a little jolt to grow." Diana turned to the window, her reflection faint in the glass, overlaying the street beyond. That one comment, one suggestion, had cracked open a possibility she hadn't realized was sealed shut. She looked back at Talia, her voice soft under the low hum of conversation and clattering cups. "So what would I even say?" she asked. Talia's smile was calm and confident. "Just be direct. Men get lost when we try to ease into things," she added. "If you tiptoe, he'll either get defensive or miss the point entirely." Diana frowned, anxiety pulling at her features. "But what if he thinks it means I've stopped loving him?" "That's not what this is about," Talia said firmly. "You're not giving up. You're being honest about what you need. Let him see that it's coming from love, not from lack. If you frame it as your personal growth, not his failure, he might understand. He might even admire you for saying it out loud." Diana nodded slowly, processing. So I tell him I'm searching for a deeper sense of aliveness, not because he's not enough, but because I'm trying to rediscover something in myself. She hesitated, her teeth catching her lip. But you know Colin. He thrives on stability. Change makes him uneasy. Talia reached across the table, giving her hand a reassuring squeeze. If he truly loves you, he'll hear you out. That's what love does. And if he's open to the idea, that means he's willing to step into the unknown with you. Trust him, and trust yourself. The next evening, Diana sat opposite Colin at their dining table, the warm glow of the pendant light casting long shadows across the room. Her chest fluttered as she rehearsed her words one last time. Then, with a quiet breath, she began. "There's something I've been thinking about," she said, her voice calm but deliberate. Colin looked up from his plate, giving her his full attention. "What's on your mind?" She hesitated briefly. "It's a little hard to explain, but lately I've been feeling unsettled." She quickly added, "It's not because of you. It's something inside me. I think I'm longing for something different, something new." Colin stayed silent, his expression unreadable, but his eyes didn't leave hers. "I've been wondering," she continued, slowly choosing her words, "what it might look like if we gave each other a bit of space. Not because anything's broken, but because maybe there's a way to become even stronger." She studied him, looking for a flicker of understanding in his still face. "I love you, Colin. That hasn't changed. But I feel like there's more to discover, about us and about myself, even if it's a little unconventional." There was a stretch of silence as Colin absorbed her words. At last he spoke, his voice steady but quiet. "So, you're talking about opening the marriage?" he asked. Diana felt her heart tighten. She gave a tentative nod. "Just for a while, just to explore. I really believe it could be healthy for both of us." Colin leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. The silence stretched a few seconds longer before he finally responded, voice low. "If that's what you need, I won't stand in your way." A wave of relief washed over Diana, mingled with something more difficult to name. Gratitude, yes, but beneath it, a strange and unfamiliar unease. Colin's reaction was composed, too composed. And somewhere deep within her, that calm stirred something uncertain. She had braced herself for resistance, maybe an argument or at least a flash of frustration. But instead, Colin's response was disarmingly still. He leaned back slowly, arms crossing over his chest, his face unreadable. "So this idea of freedom," he said, deliberately spacing each word, his voice carrying an undercurrent Diana couldn't quite place. "I take it that goes both ways?" She faltered. The question took her off guard. It hadn't occurred to her to think about what Colin might want in return. She had assumed he'd quietly accept her request for space. But looking at him now, doubt crept in. "I mean, yes," she replied carefully. "If that's something you're looking for too." He gave a slow, measured nod, his gaze locked on hers. "I respect the honesty," he said, exhaling steadily through his nose. "And I do understand. Really." He didn't break eye contact. "If this is what you need, I'm willing to support that." She forced a smile, though something in her chest twisted with unease. She'd expected resistance, or at the very least, a spark of emotion. Anything but this detached agreement. And somehow, his cool composure rattled her more than a fight would have. It wasn't just acceptance. It was almost like approval. "Thanks, Colin," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "That means a lot." He returned a faint smile, but there was a shadow behind his eyes that sent a chill rippling through her. She couldn't quite name it, but an instinct tugged at her. Maybe she wasn't steering this conversation as firmly as she thought. Maybe his calm was hiding something else, something she hadn't prepared for. A few nights later, Diana and her friend Talia stepped into a packed downtown club, where the walls throbbed with sound and color. The air was electric with noise and movement, laughter, music, bodies moving in sync beneath the flashing lights. Diana felt her pulse quicken, caught between excitement and hesitation. Talia bumped her with a grin. "I can't believe you actually came," she shouted over the bass. "How's it feel?" Diana gave a shaky laugh, the sound barely making it past her lips. "Honestly, still trying to process it. I told Colin," she added after a moment. "And he didn't argue, no protest, just this strange calm." Talia raised her eyebrows. "Really? He just said he was fine with it. No drama. Just told me he wanted me to be happy." Her brows drew together. "It almost felt rehearsed, like he knew I'd say it." Talia shrugged, dismissing the thought with a quick smile. "Sounds like he's being mature. I told you, honesty pays off." Diana nodded slowly, though she wasn't sure she believed it. "Yeah, maybe. It just felt a little too easy. He didn't even flinch. It's like he was waiting for it." Talia let out a laugh, brushing her concern aside. "Trust me, that probably means he's just as ready for some fun. Guys are like that. He's probably got his own plans lined up already. This could actually be great for both of you." Trying to shake off her lingering uncertainty, Diana took a deep breath and smiled. "So what about you?" she asked, shifting the focus. "Does your husband know you're out tonight?" There was a slight pause before Talia waved the question away. "He's out with the guys. Some hiking thing." She flashed a cheeky smile. "Remember the deal? No questions, just trust." Diana gave her a curious glance. "Wait, you mean he doesn't ask where you are? Or who you're with?" Talia laughed and hooked her arm around Diana's as they navigated toward the bar. "Come on. Being honest doesn't mean reporting every detail. It's about having freedom. That's what we agreed on." A flicker of doubt stirred again. Diana had believed openness was the foundation of this new dynamic, but Talia's carefree confidence was catching. Before she could dwell on it, Talia had ordered drinks and raised her glass. "To freedom and everything it brings," she toasted. Diana tapped her glass to hers and took a generous sip. The cocktail was sweet and warm, smoothing the edge of her nerves and replacing it with a buoyant, fizzy kind of lightness. They drifted toward the dance floor, laughing as they fell into rhythm. Time became fluid as the beat surged through the crowd, and then someone tapped her shoulder. She turned, and there he was, Cyrus, a familiar face from work. She was used to seeing him in buttoned shirts under fluorescent lights, but here, under the pulsing glow of the club, with a sly grin on his lips, he seemed like someone else entirely, cool, magnetic, almost dangerous. "Didn't expect to run into you here," he said with a playful tilt of his head. She returned the smile, her heart fluttering. "Right back at you." Cyrus introduced a friend to Talia, and soon the four of them were laughing, drinks in hand, drawn into effortless conversation. The energy of the night kept rising, pulling them from bar to dance floor and back again. Eventually, the pairs drifted apart, lost in the crowd. Diana and Cyrus ended up in a quieter spot, their voices low, the space between them shrinking. "I didn't know this side of you existed," he said, leaning a little closer. "I like it." A warmth bloomed in her chest. "I think I feel different tonight," she replied, eyes locked on his. It felt easy, like slipping into something that had always been waiting for her. At some point, they left the club together, laughter echoing into the quiet as they walked beneath city lights. The night ended at a dimly lit motel on the outskirts of town. They entered the room without hesitation. For Diana, the night pulsed with a kind of energy she hadn't felt in years. Wild, uninhibited, exactly the escape she'd longed for. It was thrilling in the moment, a release she didn't know she needed. But as morning sunlight streamed through the window, the adrenaline faded, replaced by a strange blend of satisfaction and subtle regret. She dressed quietly, stealing a glance at Cyrus, still asleep beside her. The fantasy she had replayed in her mind so many times had finally become real. Yet as she stepped into the cool morning air outside the motel, her thoughts drifted back to Colin and that impenetrable, calm exterior he always wore. When she crept into the house later that morning, the stillness inside unsettled her. Something felt off. She moved from room to room, the bedroom, the kitchen, the back patio, but there was no sign of Colin. A low current of anxiety ran through her as she grabbed her phone and called him. He picked up after a few rings, his voice measured and restrained. "Hey, Diana," he said evenly. "Everything all right?" "Where are you, Colin?" she asked, the sound of his voice bringing a surprising wave of comfort. "I'm at the office," he replied. "Gotta sign something new. Big project. It's going to keep me tied up for a while, probably even through the weekend." Diana exhaled slowly, feeling both reassured and weighed down by guilt. "Right. I didn't see you this morning and wasn't sure what was going on." "No worries," he said, his voice steady. "Just a heavy workload. I'll be back in time for dinner." She nodded to herself, her shoulders relaxing slightly. "Okay. Talk later." That evening, as the last rays of sunlight painted the living room in amber hues, she heard Colin's familiar footsteps outside. He walked in, set his briefcase by the door, and gave her a tired look. She greeted him with a soft smile. "Rough day?" she asked, trying to read the lines on his face. "Something like that," he said, nodding faintly and heading to the kitchen for a drink. She followed him with her eyes, her mind working through what she wanted to say. Taking a careful approach, she asked, "Have you been thinking much about everything lately?" He paused mid-sip and turned slightly toward her. "Everything?" She gave a half smile. "You know, this whole open relationship thing. Is it sitting right with you? Are you actually okay?" Colin placed the glass on the counter and leaned back, thoughtful. "Honestly, I haven't had the time to even process it. This project's been non-stop. Maybe once the dust settles, I'll be able to focus on all that again." Diana nodded, masking her disappointment. "Yeah, makes sense." He offered a casual shrug, then steered the conversation in a different direction. "What about you? Didn't you and Talia go out the other night?" Her heartbeat spiked. For a brief second, she considered telling him about Cyrus, but instead, she played it safe. "Yeah, we grabbed a few drinks, danced a bit, ended up at her place." "Nothing too crazy," she said, keeping her tone breezy. Colin studied her, unreadable. "And how did that feel?" She hesitated, then spoke honestly. "Actually, it felt freeing. Like I woke up some part of myself I'd forgotten. There's this energy, this spark. It caught me off guard, but I liked it." Something flickered in Colin's gaze, brief and hard to identify, but he smiled gently. "That's good to hear, Diana." "Yeah?" she asked, trying to match his smile even as uncertainty twisted inside her. His reaction was calm. Too calm. She'd expected jealousy, or at least a hint of something. Instead, Colin seemed untouched by it all. In the days that followed, Diana found herself constantly messaging with Cyrus and Talia. Cyrus was bold, funny, and direct. He made no effort to hide how much he enjoyed their night together. He hinted at plans for the weekend. An adults-only party, he called it, something wild, unforgettable. Tempted but cautious, Diana agreed. But before going all in, she needed to talk to Talia. Her nerves fluttered as she made the call. "Hey, Diana. Getting excited for the big night?" Talia answered immediately, her voice bright. Diana let out a soft laugh, tinged with hesitation. "Kind of. I actually wanted to talk first. Cyrus keeps hyping this party, and it sounds like more than I expected. Oh, it's definitely more, Talia said, laughing. But in a good way. Cyrus's parties are always next level. Diana paused, then admitted, It's just... Colin's been really distant. He's so buried in work, and I can't tell if he's genuinely okay with all of this, or if he's just checked out. Talia chuckled again, brushing the concern aside. Girl, please. Colin's probably hiding behind his job because he's off having his own fun. Men never admit they're enjoying it too. They just pretend they're too busy for feelings. A small pang of jealousy flickered inside Diana, though she tried to shake it off as soon as it surfaced. Maybe you've got a point, she conceded quietly. I just wish he'd react. Anything. Talia's voice was relaxed, confident. You need to decompress. Seriously, just drop it for tonight. Colin's job and whatever he's obsessing over will still be there tomorrow, she added with a knowing smile. Tonight is about cutting loose, actual fun. Cyrus is throwing the kind of party that resets your whole outlook. That caught Diana's attention. All right, I'll bite. But when you say fun, Talia, what exactly are we talking about here? Talia let out a soft, wicked laugh. Let's just say you might walk out of there with a few new expressions in your vocabulary, like Milk Brothers or the Captain's Wheel. Diana blinked, curiosity mingling with confusion. Captain's... What now? What does that even mean? You'll find out, Talia said with a mischievous grin. Let's just say it's not the kind of thing you do alone. As the call ended, Diana stared at her phone, the lingering buzz of nerves slowly morphing into something unexpected. Anticipation. Maybe this was exactly the kind of unpredictable night she didn't know she needed. When Saturday evening came, Diana casually mentioned to Colin that she'd be spending the night out with Talia. Just another routine girls' night. Sounds fine, he muttered, eyes never leaving the stack of papers on his desk. I'll be buried in this all night anyway. Don't wait up. She felt a strange mix of relief and silent satisfaction. All right, she said, keeping her excitement under wraps. Just don't overwork yourself. He gave a vague nod. Have a good time. As she turned away, something fluttered in her chest. A wild energy she hadn't felt in ages. His detachment somehow made this easier. He didn't know, couldn't guess, that she was stepping into something bold, maybe even reckless. That night, Diana and Talia pulled up in front of Cyrus's place. Even from the car, they could hear the steady thump of music leaking out into the street. The house was modern and welcoming, the kind of place that hinted at unpredictability. From the driveway, Diana spotted the glow of pool lights rippling across the backyard. She hadn't expected it to be this chic, or this alive. A dozen or more guests were already milling about, some chatting in clusters, others relaxing by the water, drinks in hand. Cyrus met them at the door with a wide, almost devilish smile. Diana, so glad you made it. He hugged Talia in that familiar way and waved them inside. As they passed through the sleek living room, he leaned in with a chuckle. Just so you know, pool's open season tonight. Diana arched a brow. I didn't bring anything to swim in. Cyrus shrugged like it was no big deal. Underwear's fine, or nothing at all. Totally up to you. Judgment doesn't live here. He winked before vanishing into the crowd. Diana flushed, the heat creeping up her neck, but Talia was already barefoot and glowing with excitement. Let's go, she said, her grin wide. This is going to be a night to remember. Without missing a beat, Talia slipped out of her dress, revealing a matching set of underwear, and leapt into the pool. Her splash seemed to echo the unofficial start of the evening's chaos. Cyrus reappeared, handing Diana a drink, and the tension she'd carried all day began to dissolve. The vibe was intoxicating, a mashup of college recklessness and adult indulgence. The music thumped, the lights glowed amber and gold, and the air buzzed with possibility. As the hours passed, casual conversation gave way to flirtation. Whispers of dares drifted through the crowd, each more daring than the last. Dance partners changed without warning. Laughter rose like champagne bubbles. Clothes seemed to vanish in plain sight. Whatever silent boundaries Diana thought would guide the night evaporated quickly. She kept glancing toward Talia, who was clearly in her element, laughing, spinning, wholly absorbed in the moment. Then Cyrus sidled up beside her, his arm finding her waist, his voice low and intimate. "So," he murmured, "you thinking of stepping out of your comfort zone tonight?" His hand lingered just at the base of her spine, his eyes glittering with suggestion, making her heartbeat stutter. Diana hesitated. The music, the crowd, the freedom, it all swirled around her, blurring her sense of right, wrong, and everything in between. "I think, maybe," she said softly, not quite sure, but not saying no. The gathering started to fragment, people slipping into corners, flirting openly, testing boundaries. Diana found herself in the center of unfamiliar faces and rising tension. Laughter softened into touches. Glances grew heated. The energy shifted from playful to intimate. She caught Talia's eye across the pool. Her friend raised her glass with a sly smile, silently cheering her on. But just as the night was tipping into something more charged, more physical, Diana felt something unfamiliar press down on her chest. What had moments ago seemed thrilling now felt too much, too fast. As unfamiliar hands moved toward her, her curiosity gave way to discomfort. She took a step back, drawing a sharp breath to steady herself. "Actually," she said clearly, her voice firm, "I don't think I'm ready for this." She started gathering her clothes, her movements sure, her face calm. There were a few murmurs, a couple of surprised glances, but no arguments. For the first time in what felt like forever, she had drawn her own line, against pressure, against pretense, against the version of herself she thought she needed to perform. And it felt right. Cyrus offered her a sympathetic smile. "Don't worry about it, Diana," he said kindly, his voice relaxed. "Maybe another time. It takes a bit to loosen up." But Talia wasn't ready to drop it just yet. "Come on, Diana, you're doing fine," Talia insisted, her tone light but insistent. "Just let yourself go a little. You might be surprised how much fun you'll have." Diana, however, looked even more uncertain. "I really can't, Talia," she replied softly. "I just need a bit more time." Cyrus gently placed his hand on Talia's shoulder. "It's okay," he murmured. "Let her take things at her own pace." Then, with a sly glance, he added, "Besides, I think there are still a few folks here who'd be more than happy to keep you entertained." Catching his implication, Talia laughed and gave a playful shrug before slipping back into the crowd. In moments, she was swept back into the energy of the gathering, which had taken on a more provocative edge as the night stretched on. Diana stayed near the doorway, silently observing as the atmosphere shifted into something bolder, wilder. The room vibrated with laughter, music, and the intoxicating buzz of freedom. Uncomfortable, she drifted away from the noise and found a quieter room. She poured herself a glass of wine and sank into an armchair, taking small, deliberate sips while the throb of the party pulsed faintly through the walls. Her thoughts turned inward, toward Colin, whose calm, unreadable expression lingered stubbornly in her mind. When she'd told him she was spending the night at Talia's, he hadn't protested. He'd responded with quiet support. But now, alone in this unfamiliar silence, she began to wonder if she'd ever really understood what he was thinking. She considered leaving, but instead, she sat still, her wine forgotten halfway through, the weight of her thoughts growing heavier by the moment. Hours slipped by. Eventually, the mood in the house began to ease. Partygoers emerged from shadowy corners, gathering around kitchen counters and couches with snacks and drinks. Though the edge had softened, a giddy undercurrent remained. Talia spotted Diana sitting alone and wandered over, her cheeks flushed with wine and laughter. "Hey," she said, nudging her shoulder. "You all right? You looked kinda deep in thought." Diana offered a polite smile. "I'm fine. Just thinking this might not really be my kind of scene." Talia tossed her head back with a laugh. "Come on. Everyone needs a trial run. Next time you'll dive in with the rest of us." But as pale morning light began to creep through the drapes, a strange pressure wrapped itself around Diana's chest, a weight she couldn't shake. Guests began slipping out with sleepy goodbyes, their voices casual, as if the night had been nothing out of the ordinary. Quietly, Diana slipped away too, her drive home unfolding under the gray hush of dawn. The thrill of the evening had long since faded, replaced by an uneasy, persistent ache. When she stepped inside, the house was still. She assumed Colin was asleep upstairs, but as she climbed the steps and entered the bedroom, a jarring feeling stopped her cold. The bed hadn't been slept in. Colin's side lay undisturbed. A glance around the room sent a cold shiver through her. Some of his clothes were missing. Panic surged. Her eyes landed on a stack of papers resting on the nightstand. In stark black print, one word screamed from the top of the page: divorce. The breath left her body as she snatched up the papers, hands trembling. No. This has to be a mistake, she thought. But suddenly, all of Colin's recent silence snapped into terrifying clarity. He'd been preparing this, quietly, carefully, without uttering a word. She fumbled for her phone and dialed him, straight to voicemail. She tried again. Still nothing. She called over and over, each attempt swallowed by the silence. In the days that followed, she reached out relentlessly. Voicemails, messages, desperate texts. He never responded. Colin had vanished from her life like vapor. The only answer came days later, through his lawyer. The reply was curt, sterile, and void of emotion. It cut deeper than silence. At work, the shift was swift and brutal. Where once there had been smiles and easy chatter, now there were downcast eyes and sudden silences. She learned why soon enough. Colin had submitted a packet of damning materials, screenshots, photos, even detailed summaries from the party. The rumors spread like fire through her conservative office. Judgment came fast and without mercy. Her supervisor called her into a private meeting. His tone was stiff, professional. He informed her that her conduct was under review. The career she had poured years into was now balancing on a knife's edge. When the court date finally arrived, the extent of Colin's strategy became devastatingly clear. This hadn't been a reaction. It had been an execution. Text logs, intimate photographs, surveillance summaries compiled by a private investigator. He'd followed her every move. Her late nights with Talia, moments shared with Cyrus, the precise timestamp of her arrival at the party. Diana sat paralyzed in the courtroom, watching piece after piece of her life unfold in stark detail. Her own actions laid bare. She felt naked, betrayed. Glancing around the courtroom, she sensed his presence everywhere, in the quiet confidence of his legal team, in the crisp, calculated evidence. Colin had never been detached. He had been deliberate. Where she had sought fleeting pleasures, he had watched from a distance, calculating, collecting. Methodically, his attorney presented a case built with surgical precision. And Diana, seated helplessly at the heart of it all, could only watch as her world collapsed around her. "The court has before it a compilation of text conversations between you and Mr. Martinez," the attorney stated calmly, lifting printed pages for the judge to view. "The nature of these messages is flirtatious and highly inappropriate. Additionally, a private investigator has obtained photographs clearly showing you at Mr. Martinez's home during a social event. In these images, your interaction with him raises serious concerns. Diana's breath caught as panic welled in her chest, her eyes threatening tears. This isn't real. How did things fall apart so completely, she thought, stunned and breathless. A tense quiet settled in the courtroom until her defense attorney leaned toward her, his voice hushed and reassuring. Diana, I know this feels overwhelming, but try to stay calm. We're not out of options. Just focus on breathing. But his words barely reached her. The calculated precision behind Colin's every move, the cold surgical way he had set this all in motion, was crushing. Her eyes slowly moved across the room, locking onto Colin at the prosecution's table. His face was unreadable, carved from stone. No flicker of remorse, no hint of pain, just unwavering detachment. Later, standing alone in the courthouse corridor, Diana leaned against the wall in a daze, trying to steady herself. Her purse vibrated. A message from Colin. Hands unsteady, she unlocked her phone and read the words. Now you understand. I saw everything. This was your choice, Diana. The screen blurred as tears filled her eyes. She had never pictured it ending like this. She had only wanted to feel something again, freedom, maybe even excitement, but not like this. Not with everything crumbling. While she had been chasing a thrill, Colin had watched and waited. The morning after the hearing, she tried to call him. She needed to hear his voice, to explain what words couldn't capture. Maybe, just maybe, there was still time to make things right. But each call went unanswered, straight to voicemail, again and again. Finally, her voice cracked through the receiver as she left one last message. Colin, please, if you're hearing this, I need to explain. I never meant for things to go this far. I didn't want to hurt you like this. Please, let me talk to you. But silence answered her plea. Her voice echoed back through the line, empty and alone. The weight of what she'd done settled over her like a shroud. The damage was done. The storm had already taken hold, and it had ripped through everything. The divorce proceedings were ruthless. Every intimate detail of Diana's life was hauled into the light. Her exchanges with Cyrus, the light teasing, the not-so-subtle remarks, were read aloud in cold, clinical tones. Even her nights out with Talia, once harmless fun, were now framed as reckless disregard. There was no safe space left, no place to retreat. The repercussions struck swiftly. Her employer, wary of the scandal, terminated her contract. Years of dedication, advancement, and ambition unraveled in mere days. Cyrus faced the same fate, swept out with the same tide of disgrace. Their once supportive workplace turned toxic. Hallways felt longer. Colleagues who once greeted her with warmth now passed her with tight-lipped stares. Whispers followed her like shadows. Her name became shorthand for scandal, a cautionary tale in a culture obsessed with image. She felt utterly alone, banished from the only life she had ever known. But the final blow didn't come from Colin. It came from Talia. What Diana didn't realize was that Colin had quietly delivered the damning evidence to Talia's husband, Ryan. The explosion was immediate. Talia, who had always claimed her marriage was open and unorthodox, had never told Ryan the truth. When he confronted her, it all imploded. In their living room, with tension so thick it was suffocating, he slammed a manila envelope onto the coffee table. "What's this, Talia?" he asked, his voice laced with restrained fury. "How could you lie to me, to our family?" She stood motionless, her face drained of color. It's not what it looks like," she stammered, trying to piece together an excuse from the wreckage. "Not what it looks like?" he snapped, disbelief giving way to rage. "You've been running around behind my back for months, living a lie while I stood here, clueless. Did you really think I wouldn't find out?" His voice cracked, pain overtaking his anger. Talia, once confident and sharp, was speechless. "I never wanted to hurt you," she whispered. "Well, you did," Ryan replied, his tone hollow, final. "You betrayed everything we built. I'm filing for divorce." The silence that followed was brutal, and in it, the sound of something breaking, quiet, but permanent. The moment Ryan walked out, Talia felt as though her entire world had tilted off its axis. Just minutes before, her life had felt predictable, steady, even. Now it was collapsing in real time. The consequences came fast and without mercy. Ryan filed for divorce, and within days, the scandal spread like wildfire through Talia's social circles. People she once considered loyal began to fade into the background. Friends she had leaned on for years now offered only silence. The community she thought of as home turned cold overnight. Their hushed gossip stung more than any outright confrontation. Drenched in a storm of shame and fury, Talia cut all contact with Diana, holding her and Colin squarely responsible for the wreckage. "You ruined everything, didn't you?" she typed in one last message to Diana. "I never asked for any of this. My life is in ruins because of you. You and Colin did this to me." As Diana read the message, the bitterness in Talia's words struck her like a slap, final, fierce, and unforgiving. She exhaled slowly, already knowing that no apology could undo what had been unleashed. The fallout was swift and unforgiving. Diana, too, began to feel the distance grow. Friends stopped calling. Neighbors avoided her. Even family, once a bedrock of comfort, pulled away. She could see it in their hesitant smiles and clipped conversations. The warmth she had always relied on had cooled into judgment. Things weren't any better at work. Once greeted with warmth and camaraderie, she now walked halls lined with silence. Colleagues who used to chat over coffee barely made eye contact. Quick hellos replaced easy conversations. Even her inner circle had begun to withdraw. Her parents, once unshakable in their support, had grown oddly remote. One visit to their house made it painfully clear. Her mother, usually warm and comforting, greeted her with a stilted hug and a voice lacking its usual softness. "We're just concerned about you, darling," she said. But the concern felt laced with quiet disappointment, like they no longer recognized their own daughter. At her job, lunch invites dried up. Meetings, once collaborative and dynamic, were now marked by strained silences. The moment she entered a room, the energy shifted. The scandal clung to her like a shadow she couldn't shake. Even Sophie, once her closest friend at the office, had become distant, avoiding eye contact and keeping conversations painfully surface level. Their friendship, once effortless, had eroded into something awkward and fragmented. Meanwhile, Colin wore the image of the wronged partner with near perfection. Quiet, noble, gracious. He exuded calm while the story painted him as the sympathetic figure. Public opinion gravitated to his side. In contrast, Diana became the target of harsh assumptions. Those who had once stood beside her now embraced Colin's quiet suffering, turning their judgment on her without ever saying a word. It felt as if everyone had stepped back at once. Faces she had known for years turned away when they saw her coming. Neighbors she'd once shared laughter and memories with now treated her like someone they'd never met. Day by day, Diana found herself further removed from the life she once knew. Eventually, she managed to speak to Colin again, perhaps for the last time, in a conversation she had long dreaded but could no longer avoid. They sat across from each other, silence heavy in the air between them. Diana looked at him, eyes swimming with remorse, her voice trembling under the weight of everything unsaid. "Colin, I made a huge mistake. I honestly thought, I don't know, maybe I believed it would mean something else. That somehow, in a strange way, it might even bring us closer." Her voice broke as she added, "It was just that one night with Cyrus, at that party. And it didn't even go all the way. Nothing really happened. It was a lapse in judgment. Just that, a mistake. Can you forgive me?" Colin inhaled deeply, the weariness in his posture undeniable. His gaze held something she couldn't name. Maybe sadness, maybe quiet acceptance. His features softened, but it offered no relief, only a kind of dignified exhaustion. "Diana," he said, calm and level, his tone stripped of emotion. When someone brings up the idea of opening a marriage, it's usually after they've already started living that way. By the time the conversation happens, the line's already been crossed, and you didn't really tell me the truth. Not fully. You tried to straddle both sides, but life doesn't work like that. The sting of his words landed squarely. She couldn't argue. Not with that. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she murmured, her voice no louder than a breath. Colin's gaze didn't waver. "And that's the hardest part, because I gave you room. I trusted you. And even with all that, you still kept things from me. You broke something that can't be put back together." He hesitated, weighing what to say next. "I kept hoping the woman I married was still there. But I think she's gone. And maybe you haven't realized it yet. But I have. This is done." Diana didn't move, paralyzed by the finality of his words. No amount of pleading would shift what had already been decided. No amount of regret could turn things back. "I never meant for it to end like this," she whispered, but she could already see the truth in his eyes. It was far too late. Colin looked at her one last time, his expression unreadable. "I don't think there's a path back, Diana. We've crossed that line." His voice was steady, but every word felt like a wound. She lowered her gaze, the reality of it settling in. "I only wanted to end things with clarity," Colin continued. "That's all I wanted. Maybe I seemed distant. Maybe I was too blunt. But the moment you started hiding things, it told me everything I needed to know." After a long pause, he added quietly, more to himself than to her, "This isn't something we can fix. I don't think I can do this anymore." The words landed like a final blow, heavy and irreversible. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was suffocating. Diana felt the walls tighten around her, each breath more difficult than the last, as the reality of what had just been said took hold. She had dreaded this moment for years, and yet its arrival was more devastating than she ever dared imagine. She didn't cry, not this time. It was as though her body had grown numb to sorrow, having exhausted its reserves. There had been a time she believed stepping outside her marriage, chasing something daring and unfamiliar, might jolt life back into what felt dead between her and Colin. She hoped it might give her clarity. Instead, it exposed how broken she already was. What began as a misguided search for meaning had only dismantled the fragile narrative she'd used to convince herself they were still intact. In reaching for fulfillment beyond her vows, she had unknowingly severed the last thread holding them together. "I never meant for this to happen," she whispered, her voice frayed and hollow. The confession came out cracked, as if even uttering it could cause her to splinter. Colin said nothing. He didn't have to. The weight of his silence said everything, and in that empty space, a brutal clarity emerged. This wasn't just the end of their relationship. It was the collapse of trust, of self-image, of everything she thought she knew about who she was. The realization struck like a fist to the ribs, piercing, undeniable, final. There would be no salvaging what had been lost. Her own actions had carved out this ending, leaving nothing but desolation behind. As she turned her back to Colin that night, something inside her hollowed out. The world seemed to blur, every edge dulled by a haze she couldn't escape. Each step away from him felt impossibly heavy, like she was being pulled under by invisible chains. Her chest constricted with shame, her mind spiraling under the weight of guilt. The enormity of her choices bore down on her like a crushing tide. In the days that followed, the descent only deepened. Her apartment, once a hopeful sign of a new beginning, felt more like a cage echoing with memories she couldn't outrun. She had counted on her friends to rally, on her family to offer some semblance of kindness, but they didn't. No one reached out. No one came. Her worst fear came true. She was alone. Desperate for distraction, she threw herself into work, into wine, into anything that might numb the ache, but none of it worked. The emptiness inside her refused to be filled. Tasks couldn't mask the sorrow. No drink could drown the shame. Night after night, she lay in bed, wide-eyed, trapped in a relentless reel of everything she'd done wrong. The betrayal, the deception, the irreversible damage. Over and over her mind circled back to it, and eventually the pain turned darker, heavier, consuming. She stopped eating. She isolated herself from the world. The woman who once believed she could reinvent her life vanished, replaced by a shadow she didn't recognize. Her body weakened from neglect, her thoughts twisted. Then, without warning, it all caught up to her. She collapsed at her desk. Panic broke out as coworkers scrambled to help. She trembled uncontrollably, gasping for air. It was as if the emotions she'd tried so hard to suppress had finally exploded. The doctors called it a breakdown, a severe depressive episode. This couldn't continue, they said. She needed real care. And despite their reservations, her family agreed. She was admitted to a psychiatric ward. Inside the sterile, colorless space, Diana sat alone in a room as bare as her spirit. The fluorescent lighting hummed overhead, and footsteps echoed faintly in the distance. But the loudest noise was inside her head. She had hoped that, in time, she might heal. That forgiveness, whether for herself or others, would one day arrive. But the days dragged on endlessly, and the truth only grew clearer. Some wounds don't close. The damage she had done couldn't be reversed. There was no one left to call, no one reaching out, no voice to tell her she was more than the sum of her mistakes. The routines of the facility became her only anchor. The nurses tried, encouraging her gently to talk, to open up, but she remained silent. Her grief was too knotted, too deep to explain. So she sat, staring at the empty walls, letting the weight of regret consume her. She had gained insight, yes, but not the kind that brings comfort. Her lesson carried no redemption. Time hadn't dulled her suffering. It had sharpened it. The reflection in the mirror was a stranger. She wasn't just confined by the locked doors of the facility. She was imprisoned by her own remorse. And with each day that passed, the hope she once had, to begin again, to forgive, faded further into the distance. All that remained was the echo of her decisions, repeating endlessly in a silence she couldn't escape. Elsewhere, Colin moved forward. The divorce had left scars, but it also gave him room to rebuild. Slowly, with effort and reflection, he began to restore himself. And then, something unexpected happened. He met someone. A woman whose presence brought calm where there had once been chaos. She wasn't burdened by the past. She didn't remind him of betrayal. For a man exhausted by emotional storms, her steadiness was a balm. Their relationship unfolded easily, naturally. Within a year, they were married. They chose France to start their new chapter, a dream Colin had once set aside. In that quiet corner of the world, far removed from the wreckage he'd left behind, he finally found the peace he thought he'd never know again. Tucked away in the stillness of a sleepy hamlet just beyond the reach of Paris, he discovered the tranquility he had sought for so long. In this quiet pocket of the world, the noise of his past began to fade, gently dissolving as he adjusted to the slower cadence of a different kind of life. His days passed with unhurried grace, and each night was lit by the comfort of familiar smiles and the soft presence of the woman who now shared his journey. The memory of Diana remained like a sealed book, never reopened, never spoken of, yet always present in some silent way. Colin felt no compulsion to unearth old words or revisit the silences that once lingered between them. In his decision to leave it all behind, he stumbled upon something unexpected, a calm that didn't demand explanation. The pain once etched into him by betrayal and misplaced trust had eased, its hold no longer absolute. The past had lost its authority over him. Life in France brought more than new surroundings. It brought the gift of a fresh start, one unclouded by sorrow. For the first time in what felt like forever, he could breathe without the weight pressing down on his chest. The anguish had lifted, and with it, the relentless grip of memory. Here, in this peaceful chapter, he had finally reclaimed the quiet dignity of simply being. Our story comes to an end here. Share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for taking the time to watch. If you enjoyed this story, please check out other videos on this channel. See you soon, my dear friend.